with Kim Dickens, who plays
She's great.
the hospital corporate person. Yeah, corporate asshole. That's a good description. That was heavy. And did that really happen like that? Did he go in and?
Yeah, it happened like that, and he was removed by hospital security. In the real, you can read that in Charles Graeber's book. We decided to give Namdi a little more strength so he could leave himself. But nevertheless, yes, that did happen, and the real Baldwin was asked not to come back to hospital to do more research because of that incident. So that's all true.
I have to ask you in terms of working with Amy. You know, she was on the set a lot, right? As an actor, is that something that makes you nervous, or was that helpful?
It's so intimidating. I've played a lot of real stories, and I've played a lot of Molly Bloom, Molly's Game, and Tammy Faye, like all these. Never been in a situation where I was acting in a scene of someone's life as they're watching me act in the scene. So that was intimidating. And because of COVID, we met over Zoom and talked a lot before I showed up on set. And then I saw her on set. I was doing a scene with Eddie, I believe, and I got really nervous. I said, "Oh gosh, Amy's here." And I went over and I gave her a hug, and then she's such a generous person, and she knew that I was nervous that she was on set. Because the whole time, every time I saw her, I just kept thinking, I'm a fraud, that's the real Amy, not me. So she kind of hid from my view. So she gave me the permission to tell the story.
Yeah, it's extraordinary what she went through, and I think there's actually even more to it than you had a chance to do in these 2 hours, obviously. But to play that, and then to play the illness, which is a subtext of the whole thing.
Yeah, that was much more physical than I thought it would be. When I read the script, I really underestimated the heart condition and what that would mean. And she wasn't allowed to have her heartbeat over certain beats per minute. So I talked to her about what that meant when it would happen, what she would feel like, what would happen physically in her body. I talked to other nurses. I, researched that process. And then I asked Tobias if I could have an earwig with my heartbeat in it. Since the heart is so important in the film, she's always thinking about how she calms it down. And then Tobias had the power to make the heartbeat faster or slower in the middle of a scene. So I could be acting, and it's faint in my ear, I'm acting, and then all of a sudden I hear my heart start to get faster and faster. So then I'm in the middle of the scene trying to calm myself down. And it was another little thing that really helped in the physicality, in addition to running laps and all that stuff.
Jess says running laps, she literally ran miles around this wall, and she'd be there, it would be a night shoot, she'd be running, she'd literally be running, and Tobias would call roll cameras, and she'd be running, and they'd be like, okay, there's actually a problem with the camera, she'd be off again on another. It was so intense. I do think it was it's not necessarily an action movie, but it felt like one.
This was my action movie.
That's wild. What is Tobias like as a director of actors? Can you all speak to that? Because I thought this was so exceptionally well-paced, well-directed, and everything so authentic. And I know that's what he puts into his films that he's made in Denmark and different places, but here it's a different thing, and I'm wondering what it's like. You've had a lot of experience with directors, so.
My favorite story, it's the first time this has ever happened to me, is we were doing this scene where Amy's looking up the PICS thing and the medicine, and then Charlie comes up upon her, and then they have a conversation while she's doing this, and it's like this, and she's been found out in some sense, and she's trying to hide it. That didn't really happen in real life. And the scene was written to be this high point of tension. We do one take, and then Tobias comes up to me and he goes, "Let's just do it again. I don't know what to say yet, but let me just do it again. I'm thinking about something." I said, "Okay." So we do it again, and he comes up to me after the second take, and he goes, "Yeah, this scene's not going to be in the movie." I was like, "Are you sure? Like, I can change something." Like, And then Eddie was like, "Oh yeah, let's just shoot it anyway, and then you can decide an edit." And he's so confident. He's like, "No. This didn't happen. It actually undermines her intelligence. She would never do this in front of him. We should go home." Of course, the producers are running in, going, "Stop filming it!" But he's so confident. He has such a strong point of view, and as an actor, you just feel really safe with that. You're not fishing for something. You know when he says something that's the film you're making, and you can trust that. And it was great. It's the first time it's ever happened to me.
There was also something beautiful. Our cinematographer, Jody, he and Tobias had come up with this way of shooting that involved really lighting the thing very darkly. And then I think they would open apertures so that it was brighter on the monitor than it was in the room. I remember I turned up to do the first scene, it was walking down the corridor, and it was literally pitch black. I could not see a single thing. So, and then I watched the monitor, I was like, oh, I get it, it's not. Now, one of the things that I love most about this film was it was often dark when we were shooting, and one of the things I find tricky when acting on film fundamentally is you're always having to ignore the fact that 3 meters away from you are 40 people, who are doing their job and scrutinizing, and whenever that roll camera happens, something in your stomach just lurches a little bit. And this is Tobias used the lighting, also long lenses, like that first shot of the movie, ways of allowing Jess and I and all of us to have an intimacy that felt the closest to just true reality. You're not on stage, you don't have an audience, but also you didn't feel the audience of the crew, and that was completely unique to me, and I found that incredibly freeing. So the whole process felt observational.
And it never, I told you this before, but it never telegraphs itself. I've seen this movie twice now, and I follow it as, it's just like it's unfolding. I didn't know the story either, but, I was just going the first time I saw it, oh my God, how many people knew this story before you saw the movie tonight, knew of it? See, most people don't know it at all. So it plays like, not so much as a true story, like a suspense thriller here as you're watching. It's really amazing. Now, Namdi, for you, what were the highlights here of working with Tobias?
Oh, he's not a good guy. No, I knew he is an actor's director. First time we got on the phone, he didn't know me. Nobody really knows me outside of my other life. And he started talking to me, and he just
What's
said,
your other life?
I played in the NFL for.
Oh, yes. Okay, I thought.
Not that life. The other life. And so we started talking, and immediately we started talking about theater. And that's all we were talking about for the majority of the conversation. And I had been on Broadway, I did a soldier's play, and then before that I was off Broadway. And so we just spent the entire time talking about theater, and I knew he cared about the actors. And then when we had rehearsals, which you guys were talking about, and I think it was just with Jess, and we sat down, and the rehearsals weren't about, blocking and staging and all of that. It was really, do these words feel right for your character? Or how would that person say it? That was the extent of it. And so he's an actor's director. Yeah, definitely.
That's so cool. By the way, if you haven't seen the name of the movie on Amazon that you did with Tessa,
Sylvie's Love. Check out
Sylvie's Love. Sylvie's Love is just a wonderful romantic comedy drama. It's a throwback to when they were making them in Hollywood, and I was so glad you guys got to do that. Yeah, check that out. This, on another level, Tobias, is a real indictment of hospitals. I don't ever want to go into a hospital. I really don't, especially after seeing this.
No, I feel the same. So let's hope we don't have to. But I think that it's an indictment of all systems, and hopefully it's not just about the American healthcare system and the problems around that. It's the fact that we seem as human beings to be able to, we're creating these systems that are supposed to serve us, and then slowly they turn on us and exclude humanity. And that's the Danish welfare system as much as it's the American healthcare system. And I find that fascinating. It's an interesting place where my father was a very complicated man, but he learned me one thing that I always think about. And he told me, once in a while, life will give you an opportunity to show who you are. And I always thought about that with this film, that Amy was giving like 1,000 opportunities to show who she was, and she showed up every time. And that's what made this story so interesting to do. She was in the healthcare system. Clearly, it wasn't. The tragedy of being a nurse, caring and providing care for others, and then not being given that care yourself when you need it, just seems so inhumane. And then I read the book of Job, and God is throwing everything at him to test him, and it felt like that was the story of Amy. Like we were throwing so much stuff at her, and like every time she found a way to be human, to show who she was, and and that's for me the story, and that can play out. That's the individual, that's the hero, as we all know, being in the center of a system, showing up, and in this case it's in the American healthcare system, but it could be anywhere, and it reminds us of the responsibility we have in this world we live in, where we need to show up when we are called.
Did you use real nurses, doctors here, not just for research, but are they in the movie too, in the background or anything?
Yeah, so both in the police station and especially in the hospital we populated it with real nurses and doctors, and that's not to underestimate the skill of actors, but nobody can learn how to move like an ICU nurse who has done it for 10 years. And there's just something about the luxury of letting a camera portray that, because it doesn't take more than a second for all of us to see that that's truthful, that that's real, and that gives space for us to tell the story. If we hadn't had that security in the background, it would have been harder for everybody to do our job, to just tell the story we were there to tell. And then, we shot this at the end of what we thought would be the end of the pandemic, and these nurses and doctors have kind of carried us all through for a couple of years, so we definitely owed it to all of them to step up and portray their world correctly.
Where did you shoot it? I doubt you shot it at the actual hospital, or did you?
No, we didn't. We had a hospital. We found a great hospital, and then the pandemic came, and they needed it for something else, and to make some Netflix entertainment. So we built our own hospital out in the old Fuji building, actually, in Stamford, Connecticut, just north of New York.
Sure looks authentic.
Great job.
Maybe I would go to that hospital. Like pretend hospital. Eddie, I can't say enough about your performance here. It's really. It's harrowing in that sequence here where she's trying to get both sequences in the coffee shop and then trying to get him to talk. Talk about filming that scene, both of you, but what was going through your mind and how you built that. Your process, in other words, as the others.
I think that weirdly that last part of the film was the only part that the three of us hadn't spoken about much. From the word go, a lot of the words from the interrogation were directly taken from verbatim from how Charlie was in the interrogation. But Jess talks beautifully about acting being hiding things. It's like you feel I'm literally taking the words over him up, but Jess describes it, and it's how and one of the reasons we love working together is we have quite similar processes of just taking as much research and information as you can and embedding it in you and then hiding it. And that's what the majority of this film felt like for playing Charlie. But there was a moment which I'd read about, which was when he was in court, and he, the judge was pronouncing, and the families were all there, and he started just shouting at the judge, and it was a mantra, and he spoke and shouted again and again and again and again, and he ended up being gagged and bound in court. And the violence that happened in the real interrogation scene, and that felt very sort of resonant. So what was interesting is that we had done all the work prepping our relationship, but we then didn't talk about it at all until even while we were shooting those last two scenes. It was just that wonderful thing of getting to dance opposite someone who's extraordinary and see what came. And they were like a few of the most thrilling days of work I've ever had.
For you, being opposite him, you know, I mean, it's so terrifying to watch because you never know where it's going to go. So many of these things you don't know. She's sitting in that coffee shop, and you know, when he goes ballistic in that one moment, you know, she's one brave woman, I got to tell you. But
incredible. I mean, they talked about when they put the wire on her, they could see, you know, she was paced. She had a pacemaker before her, you know, transplant. They could hear her heart. I mean, it was quite extraordinary what she did. So yeah, I guess in that scene it was a lot of trying, you know, filling myself up with the fear of what was going on, but then trying not to let him see it, and trying to keep, again, the heartbeat as calm as possible when Tobias was spiking it up in my ear. That scene, I love that scene because also I find, you know, there's a lot of strength in Amy as well. You know, for her to say those things and to do what she did, I don't find her to be sometimes like this damsel in distress. I find her to be so incredibly, you know, she's formidable. And so I love that diner scene for that. You have these moments of, like, when you say it's a dance, it's like stepping forward and stepping back and retreating. And I find that a lot through the end of the movie. And I love that the last scene, which really happened, the confession scene, I love that it's just really led with compassion and reminding him of his humanity and of their friendship. It was a beautiful thing to play, a very sad thing to play, especially when talking about the victims. But in this kind of genre, I wouldn't have expected to end it, you know, stopping the bad guy with love. That's not a story we usually tell.
There's a fun little story. Now that we are among actors. In the last take of that scene, the camera pointing at Jessica, I asked Eddie to try to beat her up a bit. So she asked the question, why? And Eddie says, they didn't stop me. And then I had asked him to just keep going, like, let's see what reactions we get from Jessica. So Eddie went like, I don't remember all of them, but they were like, you know, they didn't stop me. Bada bing, bada bam. And then a point down there, we go to, you didn't stop me. And I was like, that's brilliant. And then Jessica just said, I guess I did, motherfucker. And then I looked at the DP and I was like, all right, let's turn around, let's get it.
Is all this going to be in the Blu-ray? I want to see that scene you said. That's out. Before we go, I want to Charlie Cullen. We all know, you know, Amy's very much around here and talking about this movie. But has anyone heard from Charlie Cullen on this at all? I'm just curious.
I know that Charles Graper, who's the writer of the book, is still in some sort of contact, and I'm sure that he has told him that the movie is in the making. We have deliberately not reached out and have felt no need to it, but I know that there's still contact, so I'm sure he's aware of it.
Well, this is an extraordinary movie, and it opens in theaters, I think, on Friday. Is that right, or soon? Anybody from Netflix?
October 19th.
October 19th, and then it'll be streaming a few weeks after that. So tell everybody you know. And thank all of you for coming out here.